I have an adopted daughter. So, here's where the problem comes into play. My girlfriend's telling me she will absolutely not marry me until I get rid of my adoptive daughter. I'm 34 and male. I have an adopted daughter, Holly. She's 10 years old and I love her completely. I also have a girlfriend, Jane, who I've been with for 2 years. I'm hoping to marry her. I met her through work. We both work for my dad, Harry's company, and I worked with Jane on some projects and, well, we just bonded. We started to date, and I was very clear from the start that I had a daughter, and Holly had to be considered in any relationship that we had. Jane told me that's fine, so I decided to move to a serious relationship, and, well, I became official with Jane. I am worried about a few things, though, that have been bothering me, which might be nothing, but I guess it's good to get an opinion, right? I should probably give you a background of my life. It's hard to give advice on something that you don't know the backstory of. I grew up in a small town. It's built around the business we're known for, and my dad's a big player. It made him pretty wealthy, and I've always known that I would work for him after university, where I chose to specialize in the same field. When I was growing up, I became friends with Paul, who lived next door to me. His dad also worked in the same field, but Paul did not have an easy life. His parents would fight all the time, and he was neglected quite a lot. My parents felt sorry for Paul and spent a lot of time at our house, which was great as we were best friends. Paul's parents split up, and his mom just left. No one knew where she went, and 2 years after that, Paul's dad died in a work accident, and he moved in to live with us, and he had no other family. I always considered him a brother. He also went into the same field as my dad and worked in the company with me. When he met Jessica, he fell in love. I was happy for him. I was the best man at their wedding, and when they had their daughter, Holly, I was asked to be her godparent. I planned on being a great uncle to Holly, but, well, life had other plans. When Holly was 2 years old, Paul and Jessica were killed in a road traffic accident. They were coming home from an evening out when a drunk driver slammed into their car. Paul and Jessica were killed instantly, and Holly, well, she was injured. I spent weeks sitting next to her hospital bed while she recovered, mourning my best friends. As they had no family, Paul and Jessica had specified in their will that I would raise Holly if anything happened to them. And once Holly was released from the hospital, I took on the role as her father. It was hard, but I loved her so much, and as time goes by, I am proud to be her dad. Holly is fully aware that I'm not her real father, and I have a lot of photos around the house, especially in her room, of her parents. I tell her stories all the time about things that we used to do. It absolutely breaks my heart that I have so many memories of Paul and Jessica, but Holly has none. We've had times when Holly has cried and begged her parents to come back. Those times are hard. My parents love Holly as a grandchild, and Holly loves to spend time with my mother. They spend hours in the garden baking together. Life has been good, and when I met Jane, I thought I've gained the one thing I was missing, a loving partner. When Jane and Holly first met, I kept it short visits and mostly days out. We should go out for lunch or go on a trip to allow them to get to know each other. Holly was standoffish at first, as she was just used to having me to herself, and I understood that. She had lost so much in her life. She was scared to let herself get close to people at times, in case they left her as well. Jane admitted from the start that she did not have a lot of experience with children, but I told her to just relax and act normal, and everything would be fine. Over time, Jane spent more time with us, and we began to have her stay over. For a night at first, and then on weekends, and finally about a year ago, I asked Jane if she would like to move in with me and Holly. I did sense a little bit of reluctance at first, but it's a big thing for anyone to go from living on their own to suddenly living with two people, one of whom was a child. Holly, she was weary, but she seemed to be okay with it and things settled down. There were some teething problems, but that was to be expected. Holly was not used to having anyone else in the house, and we had routines that had been in place her whole life. Suddenly, she was having to share her time with me with another person, and I admit that there were times when Holly was very temperamental and sulky. I tried to always have one-on-one time with Holly, as it was important to me that she did not think that she was being pushed to the side by Jane. On the same theme, I made sure that Jane and I always had our little date nights. I used those times to do things with Jane as a couple. Things really fell into place. There are still ups and downs, but it would be unrealistic to think that any family was perfect in any way. My parents were the best parents in the world, but there were times when we clashed heads, and I know that they disagreed on things. It's human nature to not always agree with others. I just wanted to make it clear that I was not trying to put across a perfect life. It was a good life and we were happy. Times passed and Holly's now 10 years old. She'll be 11 years old in 2 weeks. She's developing her own opinions and her own sense of what she wants from life. It's fascinating. She loves school, especially English and music, and she has a piano and violin lessons. Paul was a musician, and it seemed it was genetic, as Holly's going to be a talented musician if she decides to carry on. I absolutely have no musical talent at all, but I do love the literature, and Holly and I share that. I've read to her since she first came to live with me, and we still read the same books and discuss them. Jane's not really into books. She prefers to watch TV, and her music tastes are very different to ours, but each their own. It's caused a couple of disagreements about what to listen to in the car, but nothing serious. So, I'm kinda drifting around the issue that I came here to talk about. It's for 2 reasons. Firstly, I'm most likely worrying over nothing, so I'm going to look like an idiot. I'm fully expecting someone with more experience in parenting to tell me that this is just what it's like raising a girl and that I need to get a grip. However, I am also worried that I may lay my worries out there and someone will tell me that I'm not seeing things, that they're not there, and then we may have an issue that I need to deal with. I never thought I would sincerely hope that someone would tell me I was an idiot. But I don't want to be the issue, as I have plans and I want to carry them through. Right, well, I'll stop beating around the bush and get to the point. A couple months ago, I came home from work, found that there was a weird silence amongst the house. Jane was in the living room, watching one of the junk television shows that she seems to enjoy, and Holly was shut up in her bedroom reading. In itself, that was not unusual, as Holly likes to have peace and quiet when she reads. But there was a sense of tension that was not usually there. I walked over, kissed Jane on the top of the head, as I always do when she's sitting on the sofa. She barely responded. I was confused and asked her what's wrong. She said she had a fight with Holly and I need to talk to her. I was concerned, as they disagree at times, but never to the point where they actually are not talking to each other. I went to talk to Holly and she was upset because Jane had told her that she could not go over to her grandparents. They live just down the street, so it's not far. I asked, why did she say that? And Holly said that she's not allowed to go because she's not done her chores well enough. I sighed and asked whether Holly thought she's done her chores well enough, and she just shrugged. Well, it turned out to be a fight over the dishes. Holly had not unloaded the dishwasher, which is one of the jobs that she has to do in her allowance. Holly has been too excited to start her new book and forgot. I smiled and ruffled her hair and said it's fine, Holly, but she should go and empty it now. She should apologize to Jane and then she could go to her grandparents. Holly grumbled, but she slunk off to the kitchen and did her chores and then Senta said sorry, somewhat reluctantly, before running off down the street to my parents. Well, Jane was annoyed that I've given in to her, but I argued that I had not, because I made her do her chores before she left. Jane said that Holly does not respect her and ignores them when she asks her to do anything, and I promised to talk to Holly about that as Jane lives here now. That was the first time they've ever clashed heads, and over the last few weeks, it's been occurring more. Holly seems to be determined not to do anything Jane asks her to do. And if I'm not home, Holly's making every excuse she can think of to go spend time with her grandmother. Jane said she barely sees her when I'm not home, and when she does, Holly's moody around her. I think it's getting to Jane. Jane and I both work long hours at times, and we're tired, so I do think that at times Jane overreacts to things that I would not even think about, but I am more used to being a parent than she is. So here's the question. Should I be worried about the relationship between my girlfriend and my daughter? Is Holly acting out because she's jealous of Jane and resents her for taking a part of her life? What do I do? I want to make sure we can live as happy family unit as I love them both. I'm planning to propose to Jane when we go on a trip in a few weeks, and I'd feel better if I knew that Holly was not going to react in a bad way about the whole situation. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. I have multiple updates for this story. The next update is very, very interesting. It came out just a little bit later because everyone in the comment section was demanding an update. I hope you guys are having a great day. Let's jump into update number 1. Well, I've read a lot of replies. There was a lot. I'm not sure that I'm any wiser, really. Things seem settled at the moment, and we have had some good times together. I've tried to make time for both the girls in my life separately and together, and we've gone on some family trips, with my parents on a couple of occasions as those went well. Someone mentioned that Holly is getting older and her hormones might be kicking in, and that made my blood run cold. I've not even thought about the fact that it was only a couple more years until Holly was a teenager, and I have to deal with all the things that come with that. I want to make sure that any underlying issues between Holly and Jane are settled before that happens. I do have friends at work with teenage children, and the way they talk, you would think that their darling kids have turned into raging demons overnight. I mentioned that to my mom, and she laughed, told me to prepare myself for mood swings, first loves, first broken hearts, and endless friendship drama of teenage girls. It did not exactly make me feel better. Anyways, I think what I'm seeing is just normal everyday family issues, especially for a blended family. Jane's been a part of our life now for 2 years, and as someone pointed out, I did not mention anything that did not seem normal issues between kids and parents. I've decided that I'll be going ahead with the proposal when we go to our trip. I plan to talk to Holly about it first, as it's not something I want to spring on her and make her look like I didn't want to tell her. Holly and I are going out for lunch today, so I'll see how that goes. I realized with hindsight that I maybe should have written this later in the day once I've spoken to Holly, but I'll just add whatever happens when we get back to this post and we'll update it. Jane is away at the moment with work, so Holly and I have the house to ourselves for 2 days. I'm taking the time to do some things that Holly loves. I managed to get the 2 days off work, benefit of working for your parents, and Holly and I are going to have lunch, go shopping for books, and do anything she wants really. I'll break here and I'll be back in a few hours. Post updated at 9 p.m. Well, things went well today for the most part. Holly and I went for lunch at a restaurant. We love this restaurant in the next town over, which is more of a beach town. There's a restaurant we've been going to for years which overlooks the bay, and we like to sit outside and watch life go by. When Holly was little, we would make up stories about things that we could see. Like, where were the boats going? We would pretend that they were pirates or adventurers looking for treasure. It's one of those favorite memories of mine. Today we talked about a music event that she would be taking part in. Holly mentioned that her violin teacher had said that Holly would benefit from a better quality violin. I have to admit hers is cheap. I got it when I was not sure she would stick with it. I agreed with her, and we looked up shops in the area where we could go after lunch. I was having such a good time, and I did feel there was an appropriate time over lunch to tell Holly about the engagement. After lunch, we went to look for the violins. You'd be surprised how long it takes to pick the perfect little violin. Luckily, the owner was an experienced musician because I had no idea what I was looking at. Also, be warned, if you have a musical child, instruments are expensive. Luckily, money's not an issue for me, but it made me realize how lucky I am to be able to provide these things for Holly. We loaded up the car before we set out. I took a deep breath and told Holly that I planned to propose to Jane. Holly did not say anything for what felt like a life age. Finally, she asked, "Would I have to call her Mom?" I was surprised that was the only question she had and asked her whether she would want to call her Mom or not. Holly shook her head firmly and said she did not. She wanted to call her Jane. I said that's reasonable and it would be perfectly A-OK. Holly shrugged and said, "I guess that's fine. I mean, I'm 10. What do I know about marrying people?" I wasn't sure what she meant, but as she seemed okay with it, I didn't push the issue. The conversation fell back to her new violin that she was excited to show her teacher, and what we were having for dinner. We got home, ordered her favorite pizza, and cuddled up on the couch to watch a movie. After all my worrying, life's back on track. Update number 2. At this point, I'm reading the last line of my last update over and over and wondering how things went so bad so fast. When Jane got back from her work trip, she was tired because it involved a lot of traveling. And when she saw that Holly was practicing on her new violin, she absolutely snapped at me, saying that I was spoiling her. Luckily, Holly did not hear, and I put it down to Jane being tired and just let it go. Our trip was coming up, and it would be a good chance for both Jane and me to relax, spend some quality time together. Holly would be spending the week with my parents, which she was looking forward to. I'd noticed she was spending more time with my parents recently, but I've been working a lot, and it made sense rather than being at home on your own. The night before the trip, we all went out for a meal and things were really chill, and we laughed and had a good time. I dropped Holly off at my parents' and she seemed distant, but I assumed she was tired as we had a late night. It's the school holidays, so she would be able to recover and chill this week. Jane and I flew off for our vacation. The engagement ring headed in my luggage. I was excited and nervous about the proposal. I didn't want to rush it, so I let us settle into the routine of a holiday for a few days first, and Jane made a few comments about how nice it was to be alone with me and have no burden hanging above us. Which was a weird thing to say, and because I'm an idiot, I let myself believe she meant work. 2 days into our trip, I asked Jane to come for a walk with me on the beach in the middle of the moonlight. I thought that would be really romantic and a good place for a proposal. We walked along the water's edge, and when we got to the part of the beach which was quiet, I got down on one knee, presented Jane with the ring I've chosen, asking her to marry me. I gotta be honest, I was hoping for more of a gushing reaction and not the thought that looked on appeared on Jane's face. So I blinked a few times and felt like a complete idiot again as I knelt on the damp sand waiting for her to say something. Well, she finally did say something all right. She spoke up and said this: "I am not against the idea and would like to get married, but there are some things I gotta discuss first, so that I'm not agreeing to a marriage that would not work out for me." I was not really sure how to reply to that. I mean, it was a proposal, not a working contract that needed the fine points hammered out. When I realized she was not going to take the ring from me, I stood up, hoping no one's seen us, as it definitely looked like I've been turned down and made a fool of myself. I said I was not sure what she meant, but we could talk about it back at the hotel, if that's what she preferred. She nodded and said that she was sorry and that I caught her off guard and there had been things she wanted to talk about with me for a while. I figured it was better to get any issues ironed out now, rather than get engaged and then have things come up. By the time we walked back to the hotel, I had reasoned out in my mind that Jane was actually being the sensible one here, and marriage was a huge commitment, and we needed to be sure that we were both on the same page. It turned out that not only were we not on the same page, but we're also not even in the same book. I'm still in shock about what happened and what Jane asked me. I'll start with the small stuff. The first thing she said was that she did not want to take my surname as she thought it was an outdated tradition and she didn't want to belong to anyone. I know a lot of people are doing things like that now, so although I was disappointed because, well, it would be nice for us to have the same name, it wasn't exactly the biggest deal in the world and the scheme of things. Well, Jane's next comment was also fairly reasonable. She wanted to make sure I did not expect her to give up her career. She enjoyed her work and she had spent a lot of time getting the education and experience she needed to work in our field, which is hard to do. It's a very niche field. She also said that she wanted me to get my dad to promote her. She says that she's been in this position for a long time, and she felt that she should be in the higher-ups of the company, especially if she was going to marry me and become my dad's daughter-in-law. I wasn't sure that I could promise that, but I did say I would talk to my dad about how we could make that happen. Although I'm high up in the company, my dad has the final say in anything business-related. James seemed okay with that. Well, then she dropped the bombshell which made all the demands mute. She said she would not marry me whilst I continued to pretend that Holly was my daughter, and not just some kid I picked up along the way. She said that we would need Holly to be rehomed before that she would agree to the engagement. Yeah, you heard that right. Rehomed, as though Holly was a pet that was in the way. As I was trying to get over the shock and form a reply, she carries on talking. She said that she had been patient whilst I played dad and spoiled the girl. She did not even use her name. But really, I was being unreasonable now. She had lived in the house for a year and the girl was still there like she belonged there. Jane said she wanted to have children after we got married and she did not want our real children to be raised in the same house as an imposter. Yeah, she called my daughter an imposter. Jane finally finished and shrugged, saying, "Those are my conditions, and they're not unreasonable, so if you're okay with them, I will accept your ring." Well, I can't type what I actually said, as it'll probably get me banned. But needless to say, I shoved the ring back into my luggage and told her there's no way I would ever marry someone who talked about my daughter like that. We got into a huge argument about Holly and Jane saying things that she should never have said to anyone, let alone a 10-year-old child. I could not stay in the room with her any longer, and I told her I was going home. She said I was acting like an unreasonable jerk, and, well, we were on vacation. I did what only can describe as rage packing, as I shoved my clothes into every single corner of my bag and the phone of the airport looking for the next flight. Jane was yelling at me about spoiling her vacation, so I told her she's welcome to stay as the room was paid for, but she would be staying on her own. Well, she decided to stay, and I got on the next flight, trying to understand how could I miss this absolute monster that was staying in my room and living under the nature of the woman I fell in love with. I wish I could say I was too manly to cry, but I can't. I sat on that plane with tears rushing down my cheeks and getting strange looks from those around me. But all I cared about was getting home to my daughter and working out what to do next. Am I a failure as a father? How did I miss this? Update number 3. Final update. Hey guys, Things have calmed down. Not really. Things have changed absolutely. When I left that hotel, I did not think to tell my parents or Holly that I was coming home. And to say that they were surprised to see me would be an absolute understatement. My mom and dad asked what was wrong, and I shook my head, saying we would talk later. In front of Holly, I just said that Jane and I had disagreed about something, and so I thought it was best that I come home. Holly just looked at me and said, "Good." That was when my mom shook her head, and I suspected I was about to learn even more about things later. Once Holly was settled in bed, I explained to my parents why I came home, and they did not seem shocked. My dad said that over the last few days, Holly had opened up to them and had been really upset at the thought that I was about to propose to someone who made her life so hard. I was shocked, as I knew there was issues between Jane and Holly, but I was not expecting anything I was about to hear. I was devastated that Holly had not thought that she could talk to me, but my mom said Holly was scared of what would happen. You see, Jane had not only told me that Holly was unwanted in her life, she's also told Holly. For months, Holly had been subjected to Jane telling her she didn't belong with me as she's not my real daughter. When I was not home, Jane punished Holly for every little thing that happened, and if there was nothing she could use, she just made something up. Holly had told my parents that Jane had ripped the pages out of her favorite books, which Holly told me she lost. She had called Holly names and said she was fat and ugly, and no wonder no one wanted her. For months, Holly had kept all this a secret from me and my parents, and it only came to surface when Holly could not bear the thought of Jane being my wife. Jane had told Holly that as soon as she married me, Holly would be thrown out on the street or would be put into a child's home with bad kids. Holly had been living in fear. It's safe to say I cried that night. In anger and frustration that my little girl was living in fear that I would ever throw her out. That would never happen. In the morning, I sat Holly down and told her that no matter what happened, she would be my daughter for the rest of her life, and I loved her more than anything. Holly got upset and cried that she had wanted to tell me, but she was scared of Jane. I reassured her that Jane would never hurt her again, and that she would be gone from our lives for good. Whilst Jane was still on vacation, I packed all her stuff, and it was waiting in the garage for her when she got back. She screamed and shouted and blamed Holly for everything. I told her she could leave the boxes in the garage until she found somewhere to live, but then they have to go. For Jane, things only got worse. She's not been just insulted by her daughter, but she's been insulted by the granddaughter of her boss. My dad takes no prisoner, and Jane was fired on the spot. Somehow word got around about what she did, and her name was blacklisted amongst our competitors with our clients. As I said, this is a very niche field, and word spreads like wildfire. So far, Jane, her cruel and bitter personality cost her everything. Holly and I are healing, and we're going on a vacation soon. I guess I would like to say that be careful who you bring into your children's lives, because you never know when you're bringing into a wolf in sheep's clothing. I just want to say I think Jane is absolutely out of her mind. Knowing everything that you know about the daughter before the relationship, about you having a job only because of your basically OP's dad, and you still make such a ridiculous request to get rid of a daughter or you're not marrying him. I mean, that's pretty childish considering she agreed in the first place to the relationship knowing the circumstances. So, I ask you guys, what would you do if you were in this unique position? Go ahead and drop your comments down below. Let's talk about it in the comment section. If you're new to the channel, go ahead and subscribe for daily videos. Have a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next one.